The Legend of La Duende Fantasma. Sam and Josh had been best friends for as long as they could remember. They did everything together, from playing video games to riding their bikes around the neighborhood. So, when Josh's grandmother fell ill and was placed under hospice care at home, it was only natural for Sam to stay with him for support. Josh's grandmother, Doña Maria, was the matriarch of their small family. She had raised Josh since he was a baby, stepping in when his own mother was too young to care for him properly. Despite her strict demeanor, Doña Maria was a loving woman who doted on her grandson and his friends. She cooked delicious meals, kept the house spotless, and shared stories of her own childhood adventures with the boys. However, beneath her warm exterior lurked a deep-rooted fear that had haunted Josh since he was a child. His mother, before she left the family, had whispered to him about the legend of La Duende Fantasma, the ghost goblin. According to the tale, Doña Maria was not entirely human, but reverting to her true goblin form after death. It was a story meant to scare misbehaving children into obedience, but for Josh, it carried a weight of truth that he couldn't shake. As they settled into Josh's house for the next few days, Sam couldn't help but notice the somber atmosphere that hung over the place. The air felt heavy with anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to occur. On the first night of Sam's stay, after a quiet dinner with Josh pulled Sam aside and spoke in hushed tones. "Sam, I need to ask you a favor," Josh said, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Sure, anything," Sam replied, concerned by the serious tone in his friend's voice. "When you go to bed tonight, promise me you won't leave your room," Josh continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And make sure to keep the door locked." Sam raised an eyebrow in confusion. "Why? Is everything okay?" Josh hesitated, then shook his head. "It's just a precaution. Trust me, you'll be safer that way." Despite his friend's cryptic warning, Sam brushed it off as a quirky superstition. He promised to heed Josh's advice, but couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. Suddenly, a loud groan is heard from Doña Maria's room. Josh runs in, and Sam follow behind. Josh sits next to her as she lays in bed. With a final deep inhale, Doña Maria stops breathing. Josh feels for a pulse to find nothing. Josh looks at Sam, then looks back as he gives his grandmother a kiss on the forehead. He then pulls the sheets over her face. Sam asks if they should call 911, but Josh says to allow her to sleep in her home one last time before going to the afterlife. Sam, unsettled by this, agrees. That night, as Sam lay in bed, the darkness seemed to press in around him, suffocating him with its heaviness. He tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Around 2 a.m., Sam was jolted awake. The usual sounds of an unsettling stillness were replaced with creaking floorboards. This sent shivers down Sam's spine. He got out of bed and made his way to Doña Maria's room, intending to check on her body. But when he opened the door, the room was empty. The bed lay untouched, the sheets neatly folded back as if she had never been there. Confused and slightly alarmed, Sam made his way downstairs, following a faint sound that seemed to echo from the kitchen. As he entered the dimly lit room, he noticed the basement door standing slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning him forward. Heart pounding, Sam approached the door and peered down into the abyss below. Moonlight streamed in through a small window, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. At the bottom of the stairs, Sam spotted a figure huddled on the cold concrete floor. It was Doña Maria, her frail form trembling as silent tears streamed down her face. Sam called out to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Doña Maria, you're alive?" The old woman turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and sorrow. Without a word, she rose to her feet and disappeared into the darkness of the basement, leaving Sam standing alone at the top of the stairs. Driven by a sense of unease, Sam descended into the depths of the basement, his footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. As he reached the bottom, he saw Doña Maria huddled in the far corner, her back turned to him as she faced the wall. "Doña Maria, what's wrong?" Sam asked, taking a hesitant step forward. For a moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, Doña Maria turned to face him, her eyes hollow and empty. Sam's breath caught in his throat as he stared into her vacant gaze, feeling a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, with a movement that was almost too quick to follow, Doña Maria's head twisted unnaturally on her shoulders, rotating a full 180 degrees until she was facing Sam once again. His blood turned to ice as he watched in horror as her skin began to peel away, revealing a grotesque, grayish-green creature beneath. It was no longer Doña Maria standing before him, but the creature of legend, La Duende Fantasma, the ghost goblin. Its eyes gleamed with malevolence as it advanced towards Sam, its twisted form contorting with unnatural grace. Paralyzed with fear, Sam could only watch helplessly as the creature closed the distance between them, its laughter echoing through the darkness like a death knell. In a desperate bid for survival, Sam turned and fled up the stairs, the creature hot on his heels. He could hear its ragged breaths and echoing laughter echoing in his ears as he reached the top, his heart pounding in his chest. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, Sam flung open the basement door, the creature's laughter still ringing in his ears. Before he got to the top of the steps, the creature jumped on his shoulders and began strangling him with the rosary necklace that Doña Maria wore. After a brief struggle, Sam's body goes limp as his neck bleeds. Josh tossed and turned in his sleep, unaware of the horror unfolding. He dreamt of his grandmother, her face twisted in agony as she cried out for help. But as he reached out to her, she slipped through his fingers like smoke, leaving nothing but darkness in her wake. The next morning, he found himself alone in the house, the silence pressing in around him like a suffocating blanket. He called out for Sam, but there was no response. Panic rising in his chest, he stumbled out of bed and made his way downstairs, his heart pounding in his ears. As he reached the kitchen, the basement door stood open, its yawning black maw beckoning him forward like a gateway to hell. Trembling with fear, Josh descended into the darkness, his footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. At the bottom of the stairs, he froze in horror at the sight that greeted him. He found the remnants of his grandmother's skin strewn across the floor, a grotesque reminder of the creature she had become. Josh ran upstairs in a panic and went into his grandmother's room. When entering, he sees the bed sheets fully covering something in the shape of a body. He aggressively pulls the covers down, and lying in the bed where his grandmother had once slept peacefully, Josh found Sam's lifeless body. Josh screams in a panic, shouting to his grandmother, "They'll think I did this. I did not do this. How could you betray me like this, Gagi? You ruined my life." Josh sits on the floor and sobs as he realizes his once beautiful grandmother is now a sinister creature that set him up for murder, ruining his life.
Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying your descent into the Paralysis Tales, hit subscribe to hear more chilling stories. If you're brave enough to share your own nightmares, subscribers can submit their terrifying stories to the email in the description below. Sleep tight.